Hey everyone, welcome back to the Heaps Creative Podcast, the show where we uncover creative archetypes and find all those commonalities shared by anyone who makes anything. I'm your host, Tyler Jackson Chappell. In this episode, I sat down with Emily Hart. Em is a publisher and co-founder of Pink Shorts Press. She was previously publisher at Hardie Grant Books and before that worked at Wakefield Press and Dillons Bookshop. She was named the book industry's rising star in 2022, and as well as bookselling, ghostwriting, and art teaching, she also has experience and a degree in marketing and brand voice, which is super evident in the distinct look and feel that herself and Margot Lloyd have created at Pink Shorts. In this conversation, we chatted about all of the little things that go on behind the scenes in the publishing world, what makes a book come together, and the importance of independent voices in creative fields. I'm super grateful for Em and her insights, and I hope everyone learned something. Enjoy. Emily Hart of Pink Shorts Press. Thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Thanks so much for asking me.
Great. Well, we'll jump straight in. Has it always been books? Has it always been literature? Like, what sparked this curiosity?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because in some ways yes, definitely. I remember as a kid being obsessed with reading. I got in trouble at school for reading under the table during class. I remember making a lot of little foldable books as a kid as well, but I also really loved drawing and art, and I remember probably the thing I most wanted to do actually was be like a book illustrator for kids. I used to be a kids art teacher, so I guess definitely books and reading, but the visual is important to me too, and maybe in some ways that has led me to be where I am in publishing, because people who say don't judge a book by its cover have not worked in publishing. We do a lot of work so that you can judge books by their cover. Yeah.
I mean, that's really interesting. It sounds like, from the beginning, it's been the whole all-encompassing process of publishing.
Yeah, I am really interested in the book as an object, I guess. And I think most readers do have an element of that. I mean, there are people who are really happy to just read ebooks, and when ebooks came along it was sort of this idea that we'd see the end of a physical book, and I know there are questions around the environmental impact of a physical book, not just in the paper usage but even in shipping them around a big country like Australia, but you can see that people are still really drawn to the physical item. They love picking it up and carrying it around with them, and sort of even just seeing where you're up to in a book, knowing that you're halfway, it feels different to seeing a number there on the screen when you're reading an ebook. I'm not an audiobook listener either. I think it's been nice to see that almost develop as its own art form. But yeah, I think the thing about a book is that it is this kind of very democratic, in a way, piece of art that you can pick up, you can hold, you can take home, and then you can also kind of collaborate with it, because as you read it, you're building the story in your head as well. So I feel like it's such an active creative form.
Yeah, it also has this ability to kind of be a community thing. Like, you can lend it out to people, and I definitely find that there's certain books, because I have a Kindle and I love it, but there's certain books I want a physical one. Like, I want to write in the margins, I want to dog ear pages.
Yeah.
Like you said, I want to see where I'm up to. Mm-hmm. I get to give it to someone afterwards, and they get to, like you said, add to it.
Yeah, I find that the books that I have left on my shelves are not necessarily my favourite books. People came over and looked at my bookshelf, and that was going to form a picture of the kind of books I like. I'm not sure if it would be super accurate, because I do think the books I love the most I'm most likely to give to someone else after I finish reading. And I'm also a big library user as well, which is still good. If you're a book reader, go into the library. Obviously it makes books way more accessible to lots more people, and authors do still get a bit of money when you lend a book out from the library.
Oh, great. I didn't actually know that.
There's
awesome.
A system that means that they do get a small royalty as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you had it go the other way, where you're so attracted to a cover design and the book is, I don't want to say terrible?
Oh my gosh, yes. I feel like everyone's had that experience, right? And I do sometimes think, one, almost like sadder thing maybe about getting closer to books, both through working through publishing or working as a bookseller, is that I've become less of a kind of spur of the moment book buyer. Like I love going in to look around, but I don't even go into the library and just sort of see what jumps out at me. I really just kind of put stuff on hold as I hear about it or read about it or it gets recommended to me. I have a list that I keep of books that I want to read. So I'm more likely to kind of go into a bookshop or go into the library app and pick out a book I already know about, which, you know, takes a bit of the magic out of it, doesn't it? I feel like there was such a nice thing to go into a bookshop, and it is not such a nice thing to go into a bookshop and just see what takes your fancy.
I think there's just so many books. It's such a hard thing.
Yeah, there are. I mean, that is an actual fact. There are not just obviously more books every year because we keep publishing more, but there are more books being published every year as well. Part of that is because there's more tools around self-publishing, which is, I think in lots of ways can be a good thing for publishing to be more accessible for people. There are a lot of, I know we wouldn't say the word AI, but there's some AI slop that gets published onto Amazon as well that kind of floods the market, which is frustrating. And yet among all that kind of diversity of publishing, it feels like the list of the books that rise to the top is almost getting narrower and narrower. And maybe especially feeling that in Australia, where the bestseller list seems to be dominated a lot of the time by books that are kind of doing well through Book Talk, or, you know, that just get filtered through from US bestseller lists. It seems like there's less space for Australian authors to kind of rise to the top and really gain some traction in the market. So it's an interesting and tricky time.
How do you think that changes?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm not going to say that after every question you ask me.
You can.
Okay, yeah. How does that change? I mean, I really, in some ways you'd hope it's through there being more kind of Australian publishers willing to take risks with interesting Australian work. But I do think that's there and it's happening, and it, you know, I hope that we're doing it, but I know that there's a lot of other small independents who are doing it. The independent scene in Australia has shrunk more than it's grown in the last couple of years, with especially Text, who was sort of the biggest independent, being bought up by Penguin, who's the biggest multinational. So kind of gone completely to the other direction, and Pantera and Affirm also being bought by bigger publishing houses. So the independent landscape in Australia has definitely shifted, but even the big publishing houses do, you know, all have people on their lists that are interesting Australian writers, and I don't think they're not trying to make it happen. I feel like there is, when you say community, there's a really nice kind of growing interest in book clubs and festivals and different ways that people can engage with authors offline, as opposed to just expecting every author to push themselves on social media. But really, I guess when I circle back to it, I don't really know what the key is to change that. If I did, I would hopefully be doing more of it.
I think really importantly, like you said, like you are part of the Pink Shorts as part of the solution, hopefully. Hopefully,
yeah. And we do really see, I guess, marketing our books as a big part of what we're here to do. Publishing, it's in the word, like you're making a book public just by actually putting it into, you know, a format that is ready to go to the printer and putting a cover on it and typesetting it. I mean, they're all big parts of the process, and editing absolutely is, like, I'm sure we'll talk about it, it's my favorite part of the process. But people can do that themselves to an extent. So definitely a big part of what you need to do as the publisher is help push the book out into the market and hopefully find a space for it. And that is something we're hoping to kind of be doing, but at the same time we don't necessarily want to be like paying Meta, and again, kind of encouraging our authors to have big social presences when we feel like we're trying to discourage people from spending heaps of time scrolling on their phones. We want them to spend more time reading a book, but how do you reach those people without kind of interrupting their scroll time to tell them about the books? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough one. But again, like I think, like you said, we're kind of moving in the right direction. I will definitely ask about editing and process a bit later. Like, we'll definitely get there. And just for anyone listening, the reason we're not going down the AI route is because I don't think we'll talk about anything else for the next hour. You mentioned that you're an art teacher for a little while, and you also did some ghostwriting. Can you talk about those experiences and how they've impacted you as a publisher?
Yeah, the art teaching is the one that I feel like you can see visually, hopefully. We worked with a great designer called Akiko Chan who did the branding of the company for us. We considered when it came to our covers if we'd go down like a Fitzcarraldo direction, which is where all the books look exactly the same, which is very chic, but also doesn't really leave much room for the books to have their own personality. But on the other end of the spectrum, we did want the books to feel like they were related in some way. And we also knew that we didn't necessarily have the budget, sadly, to work with a designer on every cover. And if we had a bit of budget, we were happy to put it towards maybe paying an artist to use their work. And then we could, if we had a template, we could work within that template. And the artwork. And so Akiko set us up a really great template, and then I just had too much fun mucking around with it. So I feel like I have kind of run with the covers a bit, which has been great. I really like doing that. I was a kids art teacher, so I guess it's a different kind of creative work in that sense, but maybe there's an element there of like kind of creative openness or something. I don't know. I feel like being around kids when they're being creative is just, that's what every creative person wants to recapture in their work, isn't it? Like getting back to that sense of imagination and not second guessing yourself too much. The art school that I used to work for, Ruth Tuck Art School, had a very strict no pencils, no erasers policy. So you worked directly in a medium that you couldn't, change. And I think that's such a great thing to do for creative confidence. As much as I am now, as an editor, such a big proponent of, just get stuff down on the page and then come back and change it. It's a really great exercise to sometimes just have to back yourself creatively and draw the line in pen. And if it's a bit wonky, that's fine. In terms of the ghostwriting, that's probably more aligned to the work that I've done editorially. The ghostwriting that I've done was really like a big editing job. I had a lot of content to work with from interviewing the person involved or people involved, and then it was about kind of putting the information where I needed to go and trying to capture the voice, which is what we as editors are really lucky to get to do. We get to kind of step into someone else's voice. As publishers, the thing we're most looking for always is a distinctive voice. And the thing that I hope Margot and I both feel like makes us good editors is that we do feel quite porous in the way we pick up people's voices. And I know when I'm loving working on a book, or even when I'm loving reading a book, when I can kind of just hear that voice narrating my whole day almost. I don't know if you ever do that when you're reading a book and you can kind of, then everything you do is suddenly kind of through the lens of that writing. And yeah, that's a big part of being an editor. The same fix is not going to work for every person's writing, because that's going to take out what makes that writing unique. Yeah.
And there is definitely distinctive voices, and I'll put links to everything you guys do in the show notes afterwards. But something that I love about your books is they do all look cohesive, but such a unique energy from each one.
Oh, that's
which
nice
is
to hear.
like,
Thank you.
I hope it sounds like that's what you're going for.
Yeah, that's
and
exactly
you've
what I'm
nailed
going for.
But it's funny that they also have that kind of childlike, like, excitement in them.
That's true. And maybe, I probably still dress like a giant toddler. I really like colour. And most publishers, maybe especially because I was working in Melbourne, and you look at the Melbourne publishers and it's all very black and white. So I think leaning into the colour has been a bit of a differentiation for us. It has caused some confusion, I think, between the colour and the kind of silly name, I guess. It has there's reasons to the name, but it has a bit of a childlike feeling as well. And so we have been confused as a children's publisher a few times. even though children's publishing is what I probably, as I said, most kind of imagined as a kid when I loved the words and I loved the visuals, I haven't ended up going down that path. And actually, it's such a specialised skill set, children's publishing, that right from the outset, the one thing we sort of said that we weren't going to do with Pink Shorts is children's publishing. I think maybe we'll never say never, but it's, even though the books look quite cute, they are for grown-ups.
There's definitely some things in there you should not be reading to your kids.
There's one book we worked on called A Concise Compendium of Wonder, which was a collaboration with Slingsby, who are a theatre production company, and that's kind of an all ages book in a way. It's a book you could read to a child or that you could read as an adult, but we published it as an adult book, and it's done exactly what we wanted, of people saying, oh, I just felt like stepping back into an earlier version of reading. So I don't know, I think more kids books for adults maybe. Yeah.
Okay, so in 2022 you were named the book industry's rising star.
Yes, thank you for that.
I mean, it's a pretty huge accomplishment.
Oh, thank you.
Did you then capitalize on that fame?
Hardly.
And is that kind of when you decided to move into Pink Shorts, or what was the timeline of it all coming together?
Timeline doesn't feel super set in our minds. Margot and I met working at Wakefield Press here in Adelaide over a decade ago. I went to Melbourne to work at Hardie Grant. She went up to Brisbane to work at UQP, currently facing some issues, and Griffith Review. But we didn't stay super close in that time. We've never been really good friends necessarily. Sorry, Margot. No, we are now. We obviously spend all of our time together now. But it was funny. I had sort of always thought that we would work well together, and we both kind of value the same things, and we both feel really passionate, not just about publishing, but about publishing in South Australia. And we both knew that we wanted to come back to Adelaide. I think there was just this feeling that there was never going to be a right time, and we could have waited maybe until we were, I don't know, had more decades of other work under our belts and were retired almost, and did it then. But we've sort of felt like maybe we needed to just lean into the fact that we both wanted to do it, and we both kind of could see a way of doing it now. Margot then went and had a baby, so the timing was even more kind of crazy in a way. She moved back to Adelaide and bought a house and started a business all within kind of a few months with a very small baby. But yeah, the backgrounds that we both had in publishing has given us a really good platform, and I think the thing that has helped us the most in that sense, apart from hopefully just having the knowledge to do what we do, is that it meant that we got an introduction to Simon & Schuster, who are our distributors. They were the first people to think that we were kids publishers, but after we told them that we weren't, they were still happy to distribute us, which has been great. And that having them as our distribution, sales, production partners has really changed the viability of us doing this and given us the reach of a big publisher while still being able to act as a small publisher and to be here in South Australia, because that is a big part of the kind of reason for being for us.
I think that's something that needs light shined on it. It's just you two. Yes, you have contractors for other things, but this would be one of those entities that from the outside looking in, you'd assume there was 20, 30, 40 people doing it, but it's just you two. And I think
there's not many publishers in Australia with that many people.
But it's something that somebody who has no kind of knowledge of publishing would assume that these are giant corporations, but it's really just two normal people who are doing really cool stuff. Yeah,
I think we've both really loved kind of coming back to a really small press mindset that we probably had at Wakefield as well, where you kind of just do a bit of everything, and you in that way do get a real feeling for the book all the way through the process, whereas in a big publishing house, you're the editor, so you just work on the words, or you're the cover designer, so you just work on the cover. You're the publicist, so you just work on the promotion. Like, you don't necessarily have that connection with a project and with an author all the way through. It does mean when it comes to proofreading, we would love to start working with freelancers a bit more, because neither of us are very good at proofreading, and it's also really hard to kind of have that sense of fresh eyes when we've been so close to the projects. So people have written in with some typos, and we appreciate it. If you read any of our books and you find typos, let us know. We'll fix them in the reprints. Again, maybe that's the children's art thing of like, I don't mind the imperfection. The typos aren't a really big deal to me.
Artistic choice.
Artistic choice, exactly. And I think when lots of people think about editing, they think about fixing typos, when that's really, like, that's such a small part of the editing process. What have I started talking about? Well, the fact there's only two of us. Yeah, no, it feels doable with just two of us at the scale that we're working. We're only releasing books twice a year to give ourselves a bit of like a shape. We don't want to make the list too big either, being pretty specific about what we do and don't publish. Then the real kind of challenge is also to make it all financially viable, obviously. And we are working towards that in doing some more kind of service-based work as well, trying to kind of show the value of words and editorial in lots of different spaces. Which is tricky, because in some ways, sometimes it feels like we've started two businesses at once. And one, we totally know what we're doing and we love doing it. And the other one, we can feel less confident sometimes and we can feel distracted by the books. But that other one is pretty key for us to try and make this something we can sustain moving forward.
What about the name Pink Shorts?
Yeah, so the name, I think we knew we wanted a South Australian connection to the name. And I can't remember how we came to pink shorts exactly. I think maybe I was wearing pink shorts at the time, so that might have helped. But I remember where we were, which we were at Adelaide Writers Week, very appropriately, sitting on the hill chatting about this kind of as a pipe dream, and we landed on the name. And then it was like, once the name was there, it felt so much more real, and I think that actually was a big kind of push for us to be able to start imagining what it would look like. So it's a reference to Don Dunstan, not necessarily in a political sense, we're not setting out to be a political publisher, but just what he, and maybe in particular what those shorts feel like they represent for South Australian history. He oversaw such a progressive era in South Australia where we were really leading the country and in some ways the world on, decriminalising homosexuality, recognising Indigenous land rights. I think set us down the path towards the kind of environmental leaders that we are at the moment. But he also had a massive focus on the arts, and set up a lot of the institutions that kind of make South Australia such a strong arts state. And he also might be one of the only sitting politicians to have ever published a cookbook during his time in office. And I think between the cookbook and the pink shorts that he wore one day to the office and sort of escaped his minders to go out the front of Parliament House to make sure that people took a photo of him in these tiny pink shorts, I think they showed that he, didn't take political life too seriously, and that, I don't know, just that feeling of being curious and interested. Like, he liked food and he liked the arts, and he obviously had this amazing kind of social political drive as well. I guess that sense of almost curiosity and a multifaceted kind of interest is what we want to do with the books as well. Yeah.
I don't know if it was intentional, but it seems like, your books are talking about some pretty real things, but they still have that level of, there's elements that are serious, but doesn't take itself too serious, which I think is a really important, and it's a cool place to be, but it's also a really important way to be, because it's a really great way to communicate with people. Yeah,
I think if we sort of set out to publish a certain type of book, I don't know if we've done that in a really premeditated way. The one thing we said, apart from not publishing children's books, is that we wanted to probably prioritize publishing creative nonfiction, and then we went and signed up 3 novels and a book of short stories. So we were following our curiosity in that sense and seeing what we got excited about. But the thing that they do seem to have all had in common is a bit of a sense of humour, and we feel like it can be a really great Trojan horse to get people interested and sort of pull them through a book. I mean, so much sort of in quotation marks literary fiction does take itself pretty seriously, and we have liked seeing that thread, that we are drawn to things that have, they're not necessarily like laugh out loud funny, but they have that kind of lightness to them. They're also pretty much all on the shorter side as well, which maybe goes against me saying we wanted to sort of counter people's short attention spans and algorithm-driven worlds, but I do think a shorter book, there's something really satisfying about it. It's satisfying for an editor and for a writer, I guess, to work on and to not kind of just had to add something to a project just for the sake of it. And it's also satisfying as a reader that you can kind of pick up a book and finish it in a weekend and maybe get out of a reading rut with a shorter title.
You got to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
And like, this is like, everything you're describing is like the perfect book for me. And it was something I spoke about in a previous interview with Mike Ladd, something I appreciate about his writing. And it's something that's so hard to do, is to have something be funny the whole way through and then at the last minute pull the rug and realize that they were actually talking about this really serious thing.
Yeah.
That's such a, I think it's such a great way to communicate.
I totally agree. And yes, I can imagine you've got a small child. I feel like books on a shorter side as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's why actually poetry has some, it's had a bit of a resurgence, not necessarily on the publishing side. I feel like it's never, maybe been harder to get a poetry book published, but I feel like poetry is the kind of form that people are interested in at the moment, because you can kind of pick it up and delve right into a creative world without taking 6 chapters to get to the heart of something. Yeah.
Speaking of publishing poetry,
yes,
friend of the show and one of your authors, Olivia De Silva, is publishing her first collection of poetry with you guys, Sick Note, and it's both of your first full collections. Yes,
it is. So it's her first poetry book and it's our first poetry book. So very exciting to have that on the list. I think, poetry, I feel like, is where Olivia's voice really takes off. It's we'd read her narrative nonfiction before we approached her about Plastic Budgie, which had started off almost in a more nonfiction direction and then went into a bit of an autofiction direction. But you can even see within those pages where she kind of tends back towards her poetic instincts in her writing. And then since we've been back in Adelaide, we've seen her perform her poetry. And she is just unbelievable as a performance poet. And yeah, this collection was sort of emerging through some of the things we'd seen her read. And then she kind of came up with a bit of a loose sort of theme as well. I think we both really love poetry collections that do take you on a bit of a thematic journey. We also love poetic memoir, actually, as well, as a side note to that. But the Sick Note kind of landed in this space of work and capitalism and chronic illness and how they kind of have collided in Olivia's life. But it's very funny and it's so it's filled with lots of references, some of which I totally get because Olivia's sort of millennial nostalgia references are spot on. Some of them I don't get because Olivia is a bit younger than me and cooler than me, and I'm like, what are you talking about? But she has such a specific kind of way of describing things and an amazing eye and an amazing voice. So really excited for the poetry kind of to be out in the world in a way that other people can experience it who haven't been able to see her read before.
Like, on a personal note, I'm so excited. Like, I love Olivia's poetry, so I'm like counting down the days till that's out in the world.
September.
Yeah, great. She was also, when I spoke with her, so adamant about how insanely supportive you guys were as publishers. And in the author's guide that you very graciously shared with me, one of the first kind of topic points is being held, and that's something you really want to do for your writers. Was this something you saw as a bit of a gap in the publishing world, or was it just you and Margot's natural, like, this is how you thought it should be done?
Yeah, I guess, like, most editors I know who work with writers are super empathetic people, and I don't know if that's because people have just read a lot, and I do think there's studies that showing that reading is really empathetic. And now this makes it sound like I'm just telling you that I'm really empathetic. It's not. It's to say that I don't think that other publishers aren't empathetic, because I think, or at least that the individual people working at publishing houses, I think can be some of the loveliest people you'll ever meet. But the machine that is commercial publishing can sometimes kind of butt up against that. And there's this feeling of kind of next project, next big author, not kind of having the time and energy to put into those relationships. And we also don't have endless time and energy, and there's definitely compromises that we have to make on that front as well. But I think the kind of collaborative level that we're able to have with our authors is really wonderful. I just think specifically for, I guess, our South Australian based authors, the fact that we are here makes a big difference. A lot of publishing is kind of done from the other end of an email, or maybe the phone every now and then, but the fact that we kind of have a space and people can come in and chat to us, that just brings an extra element to that process as well. And trying to be really transparent about, good and bad things with publishing. It's an industry that's often quite opaque, and I think as there's more and more self-publishing, and as someone like, even, this is a specific reference, but like say Taylor Swift a couple of years ago did a book, and she did it on her own. So in the past, I think she would have paired up with like a Penguin Random House, and they would have done the book together. But now she's like, I can just do a book myself. As more and more of that happens, I think publishers maybe get more and more nervous about what their role is, and so almost like gatekeep more about what they do as publishers. And I don't know, that just feels unsustainable, because there really is no reason why people can't publish a book themselves. Like we don't have to be part of the process, but we like being part of the process. And we like, that element that we get to have with authors of collaborating with them on a project. And we know that lots of authors like having that as well. They like having that editorial support. They like having that collaboration and being part of a community through a publishing house. So hopefully being able to talk about what we do doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't be doing it anymore.
That's such a good segue, because I pulled a quote from your website, and it says, "We pride ourselves on editorial care, collaboration and quality. We value generosity, transparency and inclusivity. We love building a community." And I think that's just such a great thing. Like you said, people can do this on their own, but like this writing in and of itself can be quite a like solitary experience.
Yeah.
So to actually bring other people and other ideas into this part of it, I think is such a great thing. And to do it with that level of care, and I think community, something I've noticed in the literary space in SA Adelaide, probably a bit more specifically, people are so supportive, and it's such a great space to be in.
They really are, and maybe that is, there's not a sense of competition here, or people who are here and writing, they feel that they are kind of on the outside of the very sort of literary spaces that happen over in Melbourne and Sydney. And I don't know, I think it just encourages people to actually have fun with their writing, and value other people's work, as opposed to just kind of feeling a bit nervous about everyone else's work. I don't know, I think that still, I don't know, every now and then we do wonder, who gave us permission? No one gave us permission, but still, who gave us permission to sort of put ourselves in this situation where we get to choose what we do and don't publish? That's a huge responsibility, and it's very, it's a real privilege, and we are both white women, and there's no, publishing is subjective, so being able to kind of say, we're going to publish this, or no, we're not going to publish this, and there's something about it that sometimes you're like, what are we doing? It feels wild, but we enjoy it, and I think if we are enjoying that collaborative process with the authors as well, I think that makes it sort of worthwhile for us.
Well, it just sounds like the driving force isn't oh, this is on trend right now and that's why we should publish it because it's going to make heaps of money. Like there's a lot more that goes into it, and I think that's why you should be doing it.
I don't know. I think sometimes we're allergic to things that are on trend, actually. We do. I don't know. The things that are on trend at the moment, like genre is having a great moment in the sun. And I'm so happy for it. Like definitely people who are involved in like romance and sci-fi communities who have just always felt kind of overlooked by publishing are now able to tell everyone that they told you so, that like everyone loves reading genre fiction, and that now, you know, major publishers are scrambling to try and find self-published romantasy and stuff to try and keep up with that trend. But so much of the time when something comes to us that feels actually really on trend and really saleable, we're like, oh, this is really great, but I don't think it's for us. It just doesn't feel right for us. So we might be shooting ourselves in the foot there. But we even do see where our role is for authors in that sense as well. Like if an author that we worked with came to us with a really commercial idea, we would probably encourage them to pursue commercial opportunities with it. And if for some reason they didn't want to, or that didn't happen, we'd be, you know, maybe really happy to take it on, but we would never want an author to say no to a bigger opportunity just to work with us. And if they see us as a bit of a stepping stone to then getting a more lucrative contract with a bigger publishing house that can put them onto a bigger international stage, they should definitely explore doing that option. No stone left unturned. You know, you've got to, and for someone to have a writing career, I think you've got to explore different approaches, whether that, you know, anything from doing your own kind of self-publishing through to seeing if there's places that your work could kind of live outside of you. Yeah.
But I think that humility and kind of broader scope view is, again, like why you should be doing this. And I actually might answer my next question, because I found a quote from the Sydney Morning Herald that called you the brash upstarts of Australia's publishing world. And do you think you're actually brash, or is it just that you are doing things that are more differently and it is like a very personal approach?
Yeah, it's funny, that quote, it was about us and a couple of other small publishing houses that started in the last year or so. And I'd say we're all kind of very not brash in the way that I would understand that word. Like that sounds like... That's why I was it sort of sounds like we're like setting fire to something. We're not that cool. But I guess I like the idea that we have a sense that we could do things in our own way, definitely, and maybe there's a brashness to that. Definitely has to be, I guess, a certain confidence, or I would just say a certain optimism that has to drive that too. I do think it was interesting, say, you know, at the start of the year, obviously here in South Australia, we had a pretty rocky kind of situation around Adelaide Writers' Week, and in that time we had real freedom because we're completely independent. We haven't gone for any funding yet for a few reasons, but one of them became pretty clear because we were able to say whatever we wanted and talk about how disappointed we were in what had happened in a way that... But also
really stepped up to create what became Constellation.
And that was a great response by the community, the literary community as a whole, and it was awesome to see how many people there are here in South Australia that care so much about writing and words and about the festival, and wanted to create something that in a way almost feels more true to what I think lots of people want Adelaide Writers' Week to be moving forward, a bit more local, a bit more, you know, politically diverse, and you know, that's what people... I remember one of the very first questions, so this is the kind of example, I guess, of us being independent. We were happy to go on radio and say whatever we wanted, and so then people wanted us to go on radio and say stuff, where I think other arts organisations felt like they maybe couldn't because it might compromise their funding opportunities, and that's a really complicated thing about the arts in Australia and around the world really at the moment in general. But I remember on the afternoon that it got announced, I went on ABC radio and the guy said to me, do you think writers' festivals should be political? I was like, how could they not be? You know, like writers are like thinkers, they're observing the world. Every book is inherently political, probably in some way, even if it's not kind of capital P political. And everyone seems to be happy for actual politicians to come along to writers' festivals and talk about their political memoirs, even though they're not particularly excellent pieces of literature most of the time. And I can say that because I've worked on quite a few of them. And they have plenty of platforms to talk about their work and their ideas. So really a writers' festival shouldn't necessarily be prioritising space for those kinds of people. It's for, you know, the people writers who don't have those platforms already. But yeah, every book comes from a perspective and has something to say about how we experience the world, and that, yeah, I can't imagine how you could separate that from politics. Yeah.
Well, and I think the response kind of showed that top to bottom, the writers, the people who were attending, like, were so supportive of what you created in response to the events that happened that, yeah, it can't separate those things.
Yeah, I think, you know, the centerpiece of the event, really, apart from the conversation between Louise and Randa, was the Monday. There was a really fantastic event that had been put on by a small collective of First Nations writers in South Australia, and it was all Black and Arab writers, and it was the most fantastic day of a writers' festival I feel like I've almost ever been to. It was such great programming, and the demographic in the room struck me. I mean, there was still the kind of mainstays of Adelaide Writers Week, which I might have sort of mentioned in our newsletter as being kind of grey-haired, linen-wearing ladies, and got a response back from someone who thought I was being a bit ageist there. But I think this looks like a linen blend jumpsuit, and I have plenty of grey hair, so I'll put myself in that category.
I'm wearing linen pants and I have grey hair.
And we, you know, older women are such a big part of the publishing industry, and we've just published a woman, you know, in her 70s. We love the voices of older women, but publishing is sort of aging out in a way. You know, lots of the key people and the key writers and the key readers are older women, and we need for the art form to keep being sustainable and not go the way of ballet and opera a la Timothée Chalamet's comments. You need young audiences to be excited about it. So yeah, seeing that programming drew this kind of young, cool crowd. I was like, where did these people come from? It was so great to see. And yeah, I think lessons there for all writers' festivals on how to shift their demographics a little bit. Yeah.
Which is really great.
Yeah, no, it ended up being I think more of a positive that came out of obviously a really terrible situation. Yeah.
This is a bad segue.
Okay.
So I am really curious about, how does a Pink Shorts book come into existence?
So we are open for submissions, so people can send projects through anytime they like with a form on our website. The books we've picked up so far are a mix. Some of them have come through our website. Others have come through us approaching people or through, you know, just conversations that have happened. We've had one, Alex, that came through an agent, but Margot already was aware of Alex's writing from her time at Griffith Review, so we haven't had anything that's just come to us from an agent, which is a bit different to how a big publishing house operates, especially actually overseas, maybe not so much in Australia, but the big publishing houses are getting lots of pitches from agents. And so as an author, it's more about kind of getting your work represented by an agent who will then find the right publisher for it. I mean, I think just for an agent, they need a big advance to make what they do worthwhile, and we don't have big advances to pay. So we have a slightly above industry royalty rate that gets paid on our books, but our advance is pretty modest. So most of our books we are finding kind of independently or directly. And then I guess the biggest part of it is the editing process. The authors work either with Margot or myself kind of primarily through some structural edits and some copy edits that can look different depending on what book we're talking about. But that, as I mentioned, is the process that we both really love the most. At the same time as that, obviously talking about covers and putting some concepts together for that, and starting to put together marketing materials for our sales team at Simon & Schuster. Margot is in charge of typesetting, which is actually a real art, like forming the book into the pages so the pages all look nice. What else? Is there actually any actual practical bits and pieces? The printing is something that most publishers, pretty much all publishers, don't do themselves anymore. So the books go off to a printer via our production person at Simon & Schuster to actually get printed. Most of the books in Australia get printed here in South Australia at Griffin Press. And so at least to start with, all of our books were getting printed here in South Australia, which was cool. We got to go and see them on the press. It was kind of like going to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory or something. It was magic. But they are now printing, I think, most of them at their facility in Victoria just because we've chosen a very specific format for our book. It's a B+. Most Australian fiction is printed in a C paperback, where this is real technicalities now, whereas in the US and UK, lots of fiction is printed first in a hardback. There's not a big hardback market here in Australia, but we are not a big fan of the C format paperback. It's too big, can't put it in a small bag, it's too floppy. And then the typical thing after a book has been out for a while and has done well, you might see a smaller edition, which is usually a B format. We've gone in the middle at a B+, which we think is a really nice format, nice size, but it does mean that there is pretty much just one book printer in Australia, and they now only have one machine that can print B format, and that is in Victoria. So that's sad. And there is other sort of specific production things that we do as well. We print on the reverse side of the cover to what most publishers would do. So most people, it's the same piece of cardboard that would be on the front of most paperback books, but most covers get printed on the slightly shiny side, which means that the colours show up a bit stronger. But no one really wants a super shiny cover, so then they also put a piece of plastic on top of it, one to mattify the texture, which is kind of like ironic to print on shiny and then make it matte by adding plastic. It also can add a bit of a layer of protection. We didn't want to use plastic, and we wanted a really matte look, so we instead print on the reverse side of the covers. So again, that's just like a little kind of extra complicated thing we've put in for the printer, but it helps give our books that certain look as well. We had a reprint for Olivia's book recently, and as soon as they arrived, we're like, they're too shiny, what have they done? Have they printed it on the wrong side? And it turned out they just had some different paper stock that they used, cardstock, and so there are some shiny editions of Olivia's book out there at the moment. But
probably worth a lot of money one day.
Yeah, exactly. But the next ones will go back to being more matte. So yeah, that kind of, those sort of practical production things are definitely part of what we do, but maybe not as much part of what we do as people might imagine. When you think of a publishing house, you might imagine we're spending a lot of time next to a printing machine, but not really.
And you mentioned that Margot worked at the Griffith Review, and I'm seeing a bunch of Splinter Journals around your office. Are those kind of publications one of the ways that you find writers?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, Olivia, we found through reading a bunch of her pieces in various publications. There's a book that we published in March, which is, we've done a couple of books. We did a couple of books last year that were re-releases of older books, and then this year we've done a couple of releases which are Australian editions of international books. And one of those is an author called Glenn Diaz, who won the National Book Award twice in the Philippines, and has never been published in Australia, even though this book, Iniga, his second award-winning title, was actually written here in Adelaide. He was here doing a PhD. But we read a piece of his in Splinter, and that put it on our radar, and now we've published the book, which is really cool. And the other one that we've got, it's from Singapore. It likewise won the National Book Award in Singapore a couple of years ago, and I saw Prasanthi speaking at Weekend of Words, the festival that happened around AusAsia last year, and loved how she talked about the book and then loved the book, and so now we're doing an edition of it. So I think it shows how much, things like literary journals and festivals are such a great platform for publishers to find authors. Splinter, we're so lucky to have this in South Australia and to have it in Australia too. They're not just publishing South Australian works. And it felt really nice that it launched around the same time as we did. And we're now distributing it actually and printing it as well. So yeah, we're very big fans. Yeah.
And another one, like you see Splinter and even Writer's Essay and you think it's just like giant team, but it's only a few people just like working really hard on cool stuff.
Definitely, because they love it. And yeah, Farron at Splinter is just awesome. And I think Splinter has, in many ways, a similar ethos to us. It looks a lot cooler. Tyrone, their designer, is great. And the layout and feel of these magazines are just so distinctive.
Not B+ size though.
Not B+. No, this is a C format. So you can see that's a bit, it's a bit bigger, but it works for the journal, I think.
Anyone at home will need to go buy a Splinter Journal and one of your books so they can compare the sizes.
And actually, if you want to go really deep in the lore, so Splinter, before we started printing and distributing them, they were actually a little bit bigger. So this is the first one at this size. It's slightly narrower. So if you have your full collection of Splinter journals lined up on your shelf with the spines out, they'll look perfect because they're the same height, but don't push it back too far on the shelf because it's slightly narrower this way.
We're going deep in the weeds.
That's what we spend a lot of time talking about production stuff.
But good luck. Everyone should go buy all of the Splinter journals.
They definitely
and all
should,
of your books as well.
and submit they have a really great, a similar kind of, I guess, don't take themselves too seriously. There's lots of work in this that's really fun, and I think lots of people might feel like a literary journal isn't for them if you're not like a hardcore writing person or reading person, but anyone I think could pick up a Splinter journal and love their reading experience. Yeah.
And like you mentioned, like publishing authors and writers from all over Australia. And something I was wondering, in your author's guide, you said that the release date can sometimes be a massive letdown and like super anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Why? Like you'd think that'd be like the best day of...
Yeah, I think people are expecting it to be the best day. They're expecting like confetti cannons, but there's often nothing in particular that happens on the actual release day of a book, unless you've organised a launch or something to happen on that day. The way the media kind of cycle works around books now is that you won't necessarily have a whole bunch of radio lined up for that day or anything. You'll have more promotion happening in, say, even the months around the book's release. So, yeah, it's not like it'll suddenly be like, oh wow, it's real on this day because the book is officially out. I think I recommend people go obviously on that day and have a look for the book in a bookshop and try and find their own way of celebrating it. But yeah, there's no rule that says that just because you publish a book, your life is going to change or anything like that. And I think because people have worked on books for so long and there's such a that sense of kind of mystical lore around what it would be to get a book published, that people can have a real expectation of that moment. I don't know, it's a huge achievement to just write a book, even if you don't get it published, just to finish a manuscript. So I think there's lots of things people should be celebrating through the process of writing and potentially publishing. But yeah, lots of what you do as a publisher is kind of managing expectations, unfortunately, because we're pretty realistic about how, as a small publisher in a small market of South Australia and then Australia as well, you're probably not going to be like a multi-million copy bestseller. But there's other ways that you can feel like your books are reaching people and that you're doing the work you want to do.
I think that community that you're creating, and like we spoke about, Adelaide has a really rich kind of moment of that. So like being a part of that is, those are the people who are going to really celebrate that you have a book out in the world. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, no, it does feel like a good time in South Australia. I think there's things happening.
Yeah. So besides tempering expectations, if you had a piece of advice for emerging writers or also somebody who has a manuscript, they could be the same bit of advice or separate, what would those be?
For emerging writers, it would definitely be around finding opportunities to get published. I mean, even if it is just in your like local school newsletter or whatever, depending on where you're at kind of in your life and your journey. Definitely looking at things like Splinter Journal, Griffith Review, The Guardian, like all these different places that you can get pieces published. One, because it's a way that publishers might be able to find you. Two, because you kind of build up a little bit of a list to include in your bio. And three, because it just gives you the opportunity, the experience of being edited, actually. I think lots of publishers want to know that an author is going to be open to the editorial kind of collaboration, not to kind of set on that every single one of their words is perfect and shouldn't be changed, which maybe they are, but it's good for authors to get used to that back and forth in an editing kind of partnership. If you have a manuscript, our biggest tip always is just to, hopefully as a writer you should be a really active reader as well, active kind of user of your local library or visitor of your local bookshop. Spend some time, one, getting to know your local librarian and local bookseller, because they'll potentially be the biggest champion for your book if it does kind of make it out down the line. Two, sort of looking on the shelves for books that you think are similar to yours. They might not necessarily be exactly the same genre or topic or whatever, but just that have some kind of alignment, and check who's published them. Look at the spine to see the imprint, look at the back of the acknowledgements page to see who they've worked with, and start kind of getting a feel of what kinds of publishers might be the right fit for your book. Because every publisher will have slightly different taste, and every publisher will publish a book in a slightly different way too. So if you don't kind of like how that publisher, what covers they usually do or how they promote their books or whatever, you want to have a sense of choice around who you're publishing with as well. It's kind of like a job interview, right? Where they say like, make sure you're always interviewing the employer as well as feeling like they're interviewing you. And it's the same for a publisher. You should feel like you're choosing them as much as they're choosing you.
That's really useful, and something I think a lot of people wouldn't even cross their mind.
Yeah, I think that people just really love the idea of getting published. And so if someone's going to say yes to publishing it, they're like, okay, yes, I should do it. And maybe, if you really have that goal that you've had a project, and especially maybe if you've been sitting on it for a long time and you just want it out in the world, then jump on the opportunity, definitely. If someone wants to do it, take the risk, if it feels right and you feel comfortable. But yeah, there's no... Just because, even if you've submitted something to lots of different places and you haven't heard back or you haven't got a yes, there's such an alchemy that leads to a book getting published at any time, right? It has to be the right project, landing on the right editor's desk at the right publishing house at the right time, where they don't necessarily have anything that's too similar to it and they feel like it's kind of enough within maybe a trend cycle that they could sell it. And I don't know, you might just get the editor on the wrong day and they just, I don't know, have read too many submissions and they
haven't had lunch yet.
Exactly, haven't had lunch yet. So that getting a rejection isn't, I would say, hardly ever, hopefully never, something that you should see as a reflection on the quality of your work. It's really just about whether it was a fit for that publishing house at that time. So yeah, just keep finding other options for submission, or put that project away and start working on something new. And so often people's kind of first books are not the first books that they release, are not the first books they've written. So yeah, and sometimes writing something and just sharing it with your writing group and then setting fire to it or whatever is also a really good thing to do, Yeah, there's so much value in writing that doesn't need to end up in a published book. Yeah.
Amazing. The reason I wanted to start this podcast was so people could hear things like this. So that's just such amazing advice for people.
Oh, I'm glad.
What about publishers? Maybe you don't have to give advice to existing publishers. You're more than welcome to share your wisdom. But people who are interested in getting into publishing.
Yeah, I guess same as for writers, don't get into it because you think you're going to make a lot of money. And for maybe a similar thing as well about being flexible, about getting some experience in some different places, whether that means, working, even if you imagine that you might want to work in a really literary publisher, having the experience that I did in a commercial publisher helped me a lot. Having experience in a bookshop helped me a lot, and actually was probably one of the biggest reasons that I got the job at the publishing house. So working in and around books in any way is going to be really helpful. Also thinking about different roles. Lots of people do dream of being an editor, but there's so many other jobs in a bigger publishing house around sales and production and distribution. And so there's other ways to work in and around books that aren't just being an editor. If you were going to be starting your own thing, I would encourage it. I feel like there's so much more room for small independent publishers. There's so much work that we have said no to, even though we love it, because we can't publish everything. I think that having the relationship that we have with a distributor, as I said, has been really helpful for us to operate on the scale that we want to operate on, which is kind of getting our books into bookshops across the country and kind of having an element of commercial operation. But you can do things on a much smaller scale, and again in a way that is much cooler than what we do, really. Like, there's a great sort of micro publisher and record label here in South Australia called Caps Lock, who do little zine publications. I think that we'd love to do more in kind of like riser printing and that sort of really kind of tactile printed products, which I think small runs can do so well. So I think explore how you can get something that works for your community, and even if that is something that's just sort of like run off of a photocopier and stapled, then you're still publishing. There's no that's no less legitimate than what we're doing. I'd really encourage people to do some more kind of small scale publishing.
Yeah, awesome. And you mentioned the different places you worked at and kind of the impact that had. Did you have any mentors or any like people that kind of played a big role in your journey? Yeah,
definitely. There's probably two that come to mind in particular. One, unfortunately, she's no longer with us. Her name's Liz Nicholson, and she was a designer at Wakefield Press. She was the partner of Michael Boland, who's the publisher at Wakefield Press. And I just really loved working with her, and she was really encouraging of me sort of early on in my journey. And then also when I went to Hardie Grant, I worked with a publisher called Arwen Summers, who had been at Penguin and then had come to Hardie Grant. And she was just such a wonderful person as well as a great publisher. And she taught me a lot. Very grateful to her. And actually she left Hardie Grant and I kind of in some ways sort of took her job. Like I stepped into her publishing role, which was an amazing opportunity. But then I also just was like, without her there, I was like, I wasn't enjoying it as much. So that was probably part of me leaving and eventually ending up here as well, was not kind of working alongside her anymore. There's so many really great, interesting people that work in publishing, and everyone has, I guess because you're all book people, so you inherently kind of have a big thing in common. So you meet really lovely people working in publishing. Yeah.
Great. And I think also, like you've mentioned so many times, community, obviously, that's so important. And you kind of mentioned at the start this other part of your business, but you also run workshops and you do events. And do you find that's a way to sort of pass that on, the mentorship, to kind of the next crop, or just other people who are interested that maybe don't have the experience that you have?
Yeah, we have really enjoyed doing the kind of workshop and event side of the business. I think when we originally planned how it might look, we thought we'd maybe be doing more, but then we just both get really tired. I don't know. Doing lots of events in the evening. I mean, especially Margot with a small child. There feels like there's some limits to what we can do, and also we just feel like there's heaps of people doing great events in South Australia already. I mean, the program that's on at Goodwood Books, for example, is really cool. It's a whole mix of kind of crafting, reading events, the opinionated book club that Olivia's involved in, which is awesome, silent reading nights, the kinds of things that we were just like, that's what we'd want to do. And Goodwood Books is doing such a great job of it, and it's such a beautiful space there as well. So the events that we've mainly done have been talks at like festivals and libraries, and our own, we just do a launch for each of our round of books, because we do only release books twice a year, so 2 kind of bigger events a year. And then we have our kind of series of workshops that we do as a way of kind of talking about editing in different spaces. I worked for a bit with Brand Voice as well, so we're talking about that we either go into individual businesses or we do open workshops that people come along to. They've been really, really fun. And I think having a chance to just meet people who are interested in words and writing has been really great. Although actually, the ones that we've almost enjoyed the most are people who don't think that they're interested in words and writing. We've just done a series of workshops for an engineering company on technical writing, and having, a room full of people who feel like words are kind of pretty far away from their expertise but are needing to, write all the time. That has been, one of the things that we've actually enjoyed probably doing the most.
You've seen the veil lifted.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Few last things before you go.
Sure.
Olivia's poetry collection, Sick Note, coming out in September, you said?
Yeah, so that's our first release for the year was in March. Our second release will be in September. So
can you talk about what else is coming out in September?
Yeah, absolutely. So alongside Olivia's book, we have our first illustrated book, actually. So when I was at Hardie Grant, I was doing a lot of kind of cookbooks and art books and things like that. So we're trying to do a few of those. They're big projects in terms of the work that goes into them, and they need to be printed offshore just to make them viable. So, we're just going to probably be doing them every now and then. But our first one is a book with Stavroula Adamatis, who's also known as Frida Las Vegas. She's our neighbour across from us in the Adelaide arcade. And she has put together this wild book about Australian nostalgia. It's very colourful and very fun. So that's going to be a really interesting experience for us, I think. It's the most commercial book we've done so far. And Stav is so clever and has amazing ideas. She was just playing me this morning a jingle she's written for the book that she's going to use in the marketing. So I feel like we're going to learn a lot, I think, through that experience together with Stav. And then we have that other book I mentioned from Prasanthi around 9 Yard Saris, which won a major award in Singapore. It's sort of like a novel in short stories following multiple generations of a Tamil sort of Indian Singaporean family. Includes a chapter that's set in Australia as well. And then we actually have done one more re-release. So last year we started the publishing house with a couple of re-releases from Barbara Hanrahan, wonderful artist and author, who was from South Australia but sadly passed away in the 90s. We are re-releasing in September a book called The Office as a Boat, which is from an author called Moya Costello. It was originally published in 2000. And Moya sadly actually passed away last year. We were in touch with her about another project, and it didn't come to be, and then she died. But we heard from a friend of hers who used to run a very cool feminist publishing house here in South Australia, who suggested that we could do a new edition of that book. And it's been really fun. I think these new releases have been really great for us to think about the longevity of a book. I think that's one of the nicest things about a book, is you're not kind of making something for right now. Hopefully someone could pick it up and still enjoy it in 25 years time, and being able to put a new cover on some of these books and give them an introduction. The introduction for that one is written by Holly Gramazio. She's South Australian, but she lives in London, and her book, The Husbands, was like a New York Times bestseller. They're making an Apple TV show about it, so she's smashing it. But Moya was actually her PhD supervisor at Adelaide Uni, so it's nice to have her part of that project as well. Yeah. So there are 4 books for
awesome.
September.
That's so exciting.
Yeah, and then we've just got we've almost finalised our March list for next year, and we've just finalised our first of our September books for next year too.
Yeah, wow.
So, I mean, in the context of publishing, we work pretty quickly. Lots of publishing houses would have their entire 2027 list done by now. They'd be looking at 2028. So we feel like we've got some flexibility in short time frames, but I guess from the outside it doesn't look like that.
I was going to say, that sounds very organised. You're a year ahead. That's great. Obviously that's short term. in 5 years' time, what does your creative life and Pink Shorts look like?
Yeah. Oh, I think in lots of ways, if we could just be doing exactly what we were doing, that would be amazing. Like, we don't necessarily want to do a lot more books than what we're doing at the moment. We don't necessarily want to grow the company heaps for, I don't know, maybe that's just our need for control, that we kind of like keeping it small and doing it on a certain scale. Maybe it's also a sense of discomfort in how many books there are out at the moment, and we don't want to be doing more books just for the sake of doing more books. I would love to do some other creative things too. I mean, I also freelance as an editor, so we have to do other bits of work. But yeah, I've talked about doing things like some still life drawing classes and stuff in here. So yeah, maybe some more collaborative things with some other art forms would be really cool. I think if we manage to keep this going for 5 years, and after 5 years it's feeling sustainable, then we would be super happy. I don't know if they're obviously having some books that have sold some rights overseas or won some awards or become, surprise cult bestsellers would be a dream. But if we can just be doing it on a scale that feels good for us and good for our authors, then we'll be very happy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to plug? Where can people find you? What do you have going on?
Yeah, they can go to our website, pinkshortspress.com.au. You can follow us on Instagram if you really want to, but we're terrible at it. And as I mentioned, we, don't necessarily want to be feeding that machine. Our newsletter is on Substack, which we know has its own kind of ethical issues, but it does feel like a good place to reach kind of like a reading community at the moment. Maybe we'll look at moving on to a different platform in the future. But yeah, our newsletter is probably where we most like kind of growing that community online. Maybe check us out there. We'll share our events and upcoming bits and pieces on there.
Great. There'll be links to all of that. Em, thank you so much for taking the time. And also, it was actually the conversation us and Olivia had at the library that inspired this whole thing.
She's the central point. No, thank you so much for asking me. I know it's a bit of a different thing. I'm not like an artist or a creative myself, but I love
seeing
how it's that ecosystem of creative work. It's a bit of a tension because you want people to take it seriously as an industry, but you don't want people to just see it as commercial value. I don't know. This is a space that we're always kind of thinking about, of how we sit within that ecosystem. So it was lovely to have the chat. Thank you for all the great questions.
This episode of the podcast was recorded on the land of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for all the support that everyone's been showing for the show. I really, really appreciate it, and I'm so inspired to continue interviewing such incredible people. Remember, you can follow along at heaps_creative_pod on Instagram, and feel free to reach out. Cheers.